February 28, 2026. The world is watching as a major military conflict erupts in the Middle East. The United States and Israel have launched coordinated strikes against Iran, marking a dramatic escalation after years of tension. Explosions have rocked key Iranian provinces, and the skies over major cities are filled with uncertainty. This is not a limited operation, it's a large-scale assault involving two of the world's most powerful militaries. The full extent of the damage and casualties is still unknown, but the global impact is already being felt. For decades, the threat of open war over Iran's nuclear ambitions has loomed. Today, that threat is reality. The attacks are a turning point, shifting the conflict from diplomacy and sanctions to open warfare. The immediate cause, the collapse of negotiations over Iran's nuclear program. Both Washington and Jerusalem claim the strikes are targeted and necessary. Tehran calls them unprovoked aggression. The situation is fluid, with information changing by the minute. This is not just a regional crisis, it has global implications for security, the economy, and millions of lives. As this story unfolds, we'll break down what's happening, why, and what it means for the world. The world now faces the consequences of a new and dangerous conflict in the Middle East. To understand today's strikes, we need to look at the failed diplomatic efforts of recent weeks. The trigger, the collapse of talks aimed at limiting Iran's nuclear program. The US and allies feared Iran was nearing the capability to build a nuclear weapon, a red line they vowed never to cross. Negotiations broke down over demands for strict nuclear limits and the lifting of crippling sanctions. Each side blamed the other for the failure, and the diplomatic vacuum was quickly filled by military action. Iran insists its nuclear program is peaceful, but the US, Israel, and others remain deeply skeptical. Israel, in particular, sees a nuclear-armed Iran as an existential threat and has long prepared for this possibility. Years of sanctions, covert operations, and failed diplomacy set the stage for this confrontation. The recent collapse of talks was the final straw. Washington and Jerusalem decided the risk of an Iranian nuclear weapon outweighed the dangers of war. The result, a new and perilous crisis in the Middle East. The world now faces the fallout from the failure of diplomacy. The stakes could not be higher. Soon after the strikes, the White House confirmed U.S. involvement. President Trump addressed the nation, announcing major combat operations against Iran in coordination with Israel. He framed the action as a necessary response to failed diplomacy and a direct move to neutralize threats from the Iranian regime. The president emphasized the goal to dismantle Iran's nuclear program and curb its support for regional proxies. He declared, "We gave peace a chance, but our patience has limits." Trump appealed directly to the Iranian people, urging them to reclaim their future from their leaders. The message: the U.S. stands with the Iranian people, not the regime. The speech was a clear signal of resolve and a warning to any nation considering retaliation. The U.S. is now committed to a major military confrontation, preparing the world for a potentially prolonged conflict. The global response is just beginning. Iran's response was immediate and uncompromising. A government spokesperson condemned the attacks as criminal aggression and vowed retaliation. The key message: Iran would have no red lines in its response. All options are on the table. This signals the possibility of targeting U.S. bases, Israeli cities, disrupting oil supplies, or mobilizing regional allies. The Revolutionary Guard was placed on high alert, and state media broadcast images of Iran's military might. Iran called for national unity, rallying the public against foreign aggression. The declaration of no red lines raises the stakes, threatening to turn limited strikes into a regional war. Every U.S. asset and ally in the region is now on notice. Tehran's gamble: deter further attacks or risk provoking an even stronger response. The world waits to see how Iran will act on its threat. The conflict has entered a far more dangerous phase. The first wave of US and Israeli attacks showcased advanced military coordination. Strikes targeted Iran's nuclear facilities, enrichment sites, research centers, and suspected weaponization locations. The goal: cripple Iran's nuclear program and set it back by years. US bombers and Navy warships launched powerful munitions, while Israeli jets struck with precision. The operation also hit command centers, air defenses, and Revolutionary Guard bases to disrupt Iran's ability to retaliate. The strategy: degrade both nuclear and conventional military capabilities. The strikes lasted several hours, sending shockwaves across Iran. While described as surgical, the scale of the operation inevitably caused wider disruption. Smoke rose over major cities, and civilians faced fear and confusion. The full extent of the damage is still being assessed. The US and Israel have signaled a commitment to a sustained campaign. Iran's military and nuclear posture may be fundamentally altered. Iran wasted no time in retaliating. The Revolutionary Guard launched ballistic missiles at strategic enemy positions, escalating the conflict into a direct military exchange. A major US naval base in Bahrain, headquarters of the Fifth Fleet, was among the primary targets. This was a bold move, directly challenging American military power in the region. Israel also came under attack, with air raid sirens sounding as missiles were detected. Israel's Iron Dome and Arrow defense systems were activated, now facing a real-world test. For civilians, the threat of missile strikes brought terror and uncertainty. Iran's response proved its military could still coordinate powerful attacks despite the initial strikes. By targeting US and Israeli assets, Iran made de-escalation far more difficult. The entire region is now on a war footing, with neighboring countries fearing spillover. The conflict has become a direct, state-on-state war. The world watches for the next move. As bombs fall, it's ordinary people who suffer most. In Iran, millions face chaos and fear as explosions and sirens shatter the night. Families huddle in their homes, unsure if they're safe. Even precise strikes create panic, debris, and damage far from military targets. Years of sanctions have already strained daily life. Now, war brings new hardship, threatening basic services and supplies. People rush to stock up on essentials, bracing for a long conflict. In Israel, air raid sirens force people into shelters. Schools close, and daily life is upended. The constant threat of attack creates deep anxiety, especially for children. Across the region, instability spreads. Countries like Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen fear being drawn in. Iran's allies may open new fronts, risking a wider regional war. Millions already living in conflict zones or as refugees now face even greater uncertainty. The human cost extends far beyond the immediate combatants. War's true toll is measured in shattered lives. The conflict's economic shockwaves were immediate. Oil prices surged as fighting threatened the world's most vital energy corridor, the Strait of Hormuz. Any disruption here risks choking off a massive share of global oil exports. Fears of damaged facilities or a blockade sent crude prices soaring. The US Navy issued shipping advisories, and insurance costs for tankers skyrocketed. OPEC Plus called an emergency meeting to discuss boosting production and stabilizing markets. But if the strait is closed, even increased output may not be enough. A prolonged crisis would drive up costs for businesses and consumers worldwide. For energy-dependent nations, the pain could be severe. This is not just a regional war. It's a direct threat to global economic stability. The world's ability to manage the fallout will be tested. As the first day ends, uncertainty reigns. The immediate question: how will the US and Israel respond to Iran's missile attacks? The risk of a cycle of escalation is high, with each side poised for further retaliation. World leaders call for restraint, but open warfare limits their influence. The UN Security Council may convene, but divisions could stall action. Diplomatic efforts may now focus on containing the conflict and preventing regional spread. The stability of Iran's government is also in question, as external pressure could either weaken or strengthen its grip. Millions of Iranians are caught between a hostile regime and foreign bombs. The decision to abandon diplomacy has unleashed forces that are hard to control. The risk of miscalculation, regional expansion, and humanitarian catastrophe is real. February 28, 2026, marks a turning point. The hope for a peaceful solution has given way to war. The world waits, hoping for a path away from catastrophe.